Welcome to the ACF Chef's Table webinar series. I'm your host, Rocco Paradiso, and I am super excited to be here with you all. Thank you so very much for joining today's webinar series on enhanced nutrition. For those unfamiliar with the American Culinary Federation, we're the leading organization for culinary professionals offering education, certification, and a community of chefs and food service leaders. If you're not yet a member, today's webinar is going to be a great taste of what we can offer. Today, we'll be joining ACF chef Matthew Thompson as he shares how enhanced nutrition is transforming kitchens, healthcare, and the everyday plate. Feel free to ask questions with the Q&A function at any time. Let's meet today's presenter. Chef Matthew Thompson is one of the most credentialed culinary executives in the United States, holding 10 advanced degrees and certification across businesses, culinary arts, sustainable food systems, and lifestyle medicine. As a chief culinary officer for Restora Hospitality and Phoenix 3 Collective, he blends world-class culinary mastery with evidence-based nutrition. Chef is also a World Chef Certified Master Chef, an ACF Certified Executive Chef, and Certified Culinary Administrator, CIA Pro Chef Level 3, and Harvard-trained lifestyle medicine professional, and also an MBA of Johnson & Wales University. He is the primary architect of the ICAA Culinary Hospitality Standards, which are now the national benchmark for excellence in senior living dining. His work has shaped an industry-first culinary philosophy centered on responsible sourcing, scratch cooking, and nutrition-forward design, and food that is, well, unapologetically delicious. I'll pass it over to Chef Thompson. Chef Matthew Thompson, sir, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Rocco, and I appreciate it. Good day, everyone, and thank you to the American Culinary Federation for the invitation to address you today. Before we jump into today's content, I'd like to ask you all a question. When was the last time that a diner thanked you for the fiber content of the meal that you served them? If you're like me, it's probably never. And unfortunately, everything is changing in today's dining environment and with today's chefs in the restaurant. And for most of the culinary history, our job was clear. It was to, frankly, make food taste good, make it memorable, make it craveable. But today, food is expected to do more, and it's expected to support energy and protect muscle, stabilize blood sugar, reduce inflammation. And frankly, that's a different job description than chefs have had in the past. So chefs are no longer just simple flavor builders. We have to think differently about the food that we're presenting. And that comes with a tremendous opportunity. So today we're going to dive into enhanced nutrition. And before we do that, I just want to be clear about what enhanced nutrition is not. And it's not about taking food away. It's not about restriction. Really what it's about is about upgrading what we already cook, upgrading it to have more fiber, elevated protein quality, using things like intentional fats, extra virgin olive oil. How about we think about things like microbiome support and metabolic stability? The good news is we don't need to reinvent cuisine or to change the way that we're thinking about technique. What we need to do is cook with more intention. So if we all agree that food has to do more and that we as chefs are no longer just flavor builders, we are in some degree frontline practitioners of public health. If that's the new paradigm that we're working in, then we need to ask ourselves the question, where do we start? Because this whole terminology around enhanced nutrition, it can frankly sound abstract or theoretical, and it can sound like something really for a white paper or something designed for the laboratory and not necessarily in the kitchen. And today we're going to focus on real food, not supplements or trends. We're going to talk about something remarkably simple, and we're going to kick things off by talking about fiber. If there's one nutrient that reveals the gap between how we cook and how we could cook, it's fiber. And listen, I know fiber is not glamorous. It's maybe not trending, maybe it is, depending on what you look at, but certainly fiber is foundational. And frankly, it's the single most under-delivered nutrient in our food system today. So instead of talking about this in theory, let's talk about it in reality. because it's powerful when you see it. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple of examples. So what I've got here is a tray, and this tray represents what the average American consumes in a day. And on this tray, I've got some pretty common items, a slice of white toast, for example. Just because we're talking about fiber, this has 1 gram of fiber. We've got some white rice, half a cup of white rice, half a gram of fiber. 1 small banana, essentially 3 grams of fiber. Small side salad, just about every restaurant you go to has one of these, 2 grams of fiber. Half a cup of cooked carrots, about 2 grams of fiber, and an apple. Now, all of this together, nothing here is really strange. It's things that we would recognize. In fact, many of us would classify this as healthy food. Yet there's only 15 grams of fiber on this tray. And this is roughly what the standard American consumes in a day. So let's think about this in the framework of what could it be? I've got another tray for you. So let's take a look at this tray. And on this tray is the recommendation. And by the way, recommended daily fiber intake for men, it is 30 to 38 grams of fiber. For women, 21 to 25 grams of fiber. This tray looks very different from the tray that we just looked at. First item on this tray, 1 cup of cooked lentils, 15 grams of fiber. Coincidentally, there's as much fiber in this 1 cup of cooked lentils than this entire tray that we just looked at. Next up, half a cup of raspberries, 4 grams of fiber. 1 cup of broccoli, 5 grams of fiber. Quarter cup of almonds, 4 grams of fiber. Different about this tray is we have a slice of whole grain toast or whole grain bread. And then lastly, half an avocado is 5 grams of fiber. The fiber content of the foods found on this tray is around 36 grams of fiber. And look how different it is from the first tray. This tray looks more bountiful, more colorful, more abundant. By the way, there's some great texture here, and it's really been constructed more intentional. And what I wanted to point out with this example is this is the opportunity from tray A, the standard American diet, to tray B, the way that we should be thinking about enhanced nutrition. The difference between these trays is not discipline, it's design. Many of us on today's webinar have designed plates for protein content or engineered it to be cost neutral or meet some cost parameters. We engineer for plate coverage and presentation. We want everything to look vibrant, but very few of us engineer for fiber, which is unfortunate because fiber influences so many systems within our body. Blood sugar control, satiety, that sense of I'm full and I'm satisfied from eating this meal. Microbiome diversity, we'll talk about that in a bit. Cardiovascular risk and lowering inflammation load. So let me show you something perhaps even more visual. So we talked about 15 grams of fiber. This bowl represents 15 grams of fiber. This one happens to be a brand, wheat brand. Same exact ingredient, 35 grams of fiber in this bowl. The volume difference between bowl A and bowl B is significant. And the gap between the two is the opportunity that we're going to talk today. Not to restrict, not to shame, but to elevate the opportunity. We don't need to remove things or remove pleasure or make something feel less. What we need to do instead is upgrade the structure. Because frankly, enhanced nutrition isn't about cutting carbs, it's about upgrading them. Upgrading them from something like refined slices of bread, a white slice of bread, to a whole grain. From something like empty to functional. From incidental fiber to intentional fiber. That's what enhanced nutrition is all about. And it really begins here on the cutting board. In the thought process, in the mise en place, all happens before we even put a pan on the stove to get ready. So here's another example. Let me move these off to the side. Now let's talk about the way that this is represented on the plate. I'll show you 2 more examples. I want you to look at these 2 plates and don't overthink it. Just observe what you're seeing. Here's plate A. This is a plate of white pasta, slice of garlic bread. You see it's got minimal vegetables. This essentially has 5 grams of fiber. this is what you'd expect to get at the average restaurant. Nothing here too exciting, pretty approachable. And frankly, as a father of two kids, this is the sort of thing I'd expect my kids to be served. Plate A. All right, I got another plate for you. Very similar, plate B. Now, this particular plate is very similar in terms of composition, except I've used lentil pasta in this application. I've used a series of fresh roasted vegetables. I've added some tossed greens. I've drizzled with a little bit of olive oil. There's some seeds, some fresh herbs, vastly different. And I'm showing these two examples because, frankly, they're both calorically the same. There's 600 calories on both plates. However, nutrient density is very, very different. Calories tell us how much energy is present in each of these dishes. Density tells us what that energy does. And I would suggest that the future of culinary excellence isn't about shrinking the plates, it's about strengthening them. Using the techniques of enhanced nutrition is really going to help elevate this dish. And again, it's not a cuisine, it's a skill set, something that we need to learn to do as we weave ingredients together and create dishes for the diners that are in our restaurant or in our locations. Ultimately, what we're looking to do is upgrade this experience for higher nutrient density, better metabolic responses, stronger satiety, because, hey, I'm coming out to eat at your restaurant. I want this to taste great and I want to feel awesome when I leave. But it should also do things like support gut support and microbiome. It should reduce our inflammatory load. And when we think about the techniques needed to deliver on this experience, we need to step back and think intently about our menu and our ingredient selection in mise en place before we ever get to the stove. The technique, the portion size, this is systems level thinking. So let's make this real for a second. And let's talk about weaving a couple of these concepts together. The concepts of fiber, protein, metabolic stability, and let's demonstrate how this will all come together. I'm going to do a couple of recipes for you today. The first recipe will be the Mediterranean lentil and roasted vegetable power bowl. So let me pull this together. Whoops, I'm losing my earbuds here. All right, so to pull this recipe together, what I'm going to start with is a base of lentils. And fiber is no longer just optional. It's something that we need to think about and we need to design intentionally. So here's how I put this together. What we essentially have is 1.5 cups of lentils, which will go into our stock pot. And then we've got 3 cups of water or low sodium vegetable stock. Great place to start. Let's bring some flavor to the party and get that going. That will go into the pot with 1 bay leaf and a crushed clove of garlic and a teaspoon of salt. That all goes into a pot and we put that on the stove and we bring that gently to a boil. What we're looking to do is bring it up to a boil and then we will reduce the water to a gentle simmer. And ultimately, we're going to end up cooking for about 18 to 22 minutes. Just as a matter of ratio, essentially 1 cup of dry lentils will yield you about 3 cups of cooked. Once we finish cooking this, we're going to end up delivering between 15 and 18 grams of total fiber total. And that's really important and that I'll explain in a moment. This happens to be a brown or a green lentil, pretty common every day, but don't forget about the vast varieties of lentils out there, crimson lentils, golden lentils. There's 1,000 different varieties for us to think about, intentionally bringing some visual appeal, some texture contrast. There's a lot of different ways that we can leverage this one simple ingredient in the varieties available to us. So as we're creating this dish, what I will show you is I pulled out these lentils. We do want to pull them while they're still soft, but not mushy. Sometimes there's a little bit of residual cooking liquid left in there. If so, just slightly drain them, remove the bay leaf and the garlic. What I like to do is lay it on a small sheet tray, and let's keep this warm while we work on the next component. So that's the base of our dish. And you'll see how we're constructing this dish potentially a bit differently than perhaps you're used to. We're not thinking about this as being a pork dish or a seafood dish. We're thinking differently about this where vegetables end up being the star. So I've got the lentils being hot held right now, and I'm going to turn my attention now to the roasted vegetables. Simple mixing bowl. I'm going to start with, and frankly, you can use any vegetables available to you. These are the ones that I've got today. Some red bell pepper, which I just briefly diced up. That will go into the bowl. We've also got some zucchini, which is available now. I got that nicely seeded and diced up. Some cherry tomatoes. I found some beautiful ones with at least 3 different colors here, which is nice. So I'll toss that in there. A little bit of red onion and that aromatic flavors that we're looking for. Again, very simple, one sheet pan type of meal. I'm going to toss that with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, just drizzle that in, toss it around a bit to get a good coat on there. And then I'm going to add my seasoning. My seasoning is a little bit of dried oregano, some salt and pepper. Of course, you can riff on this with whatever seasoning profile you're looking for. The idea is, again, just leveraging some toasted spices and getting this all to taste great. Going to toss that together and then lay it out briefly on a small sheet tray. That's going to go into my oven at about 420 degrees or so, roughly 18 to 22 minutes until slightly caramelized. I'll show you what we're ultimately going for here. It's the idea of these abundant flavors and colors. When it comes out, what I want to point out to you is that the roasting of these vegetables brings out the natural sweetness without adding sugar. We've thought about, the herbs and the extra virgin olive oil that we're adding to this, and it ends up signaling abundance versus restriction. Don't look at vegetables as being a garnish here. Look at vegetables as being a vehicle to add nutrient density and get a good abundance. Certainly we're starting to come into springtime now, and asparagus and some other vegetables are going to be seasonally available. Feel free to take a riff on this and pull it all together. So for now, I'm going to set this off to the side and work on our dressing. So on the dressing, I'll pull that over. This dressing is going to be relatively straightforward. I've started all the prep and all the mise en place, so this will be nice and straightforward. I'm going to start with a little bit of zest and juice of 1 lemon. And frankly, you can use any citrus. So, if you've got some pomelos or some oranges or what have you, if you want to get it exotic and do a blood orange to change the color, this is all substitutable. So that will go into the bowl. A little red wine vinegar, my Dijon, which will be my emulsifier. So I'll get my Dijon in here and start to whisk that together. And I'll add in some of my seasonings. I've got some minced garlic. I've got a whole series of fresh herbs. I've got some Italian parsley, some fresh mint, a little bit of oregano to complement the oregano that I had on the vegetables. And I'm just going to slowly do a little bit of emulsion. I'm going to whisk in my extra virgin olive oil to get that nicely emulsified. While I'm on this topic, I just want to point out, don't be afraid of the extra virgin olive oil. Some people think, oh, olive oil is just fat. Well, this is not just fat. Ensuring that we have a healthy fat helps us to deliver flavor. It helps us with that mouthfeel. It helps any of the fat-soluble nutrient absorption. So it's really important that we add some of this. And frankly, that fat also helps with satiety. It gives that sense of fullness. What I also like about this particular recipe is that we're leaning into acids and fresh herbs to drive the flavor experiences versus leaning on sodium or a big squeeze of honey, something to that effect to help drive the experience. All right, so now I've got those 3 elements all tied together, and let's start putting this in a bowl. So here's my quick plate up. I've got this nice bowl, and I'll start my assembly here with the lentils. And by the way, this is the protein component. So lentils are high in protein, high in iron, folate. Most people are still thinking in the concept of the 3-compartment plate. I'm going to put my starch down, put my vegetable next to it, and then my piece of chicken breast or my filet mignon or my salmon right on top. And that's the way we're thinking about it. Not so the case with this, where the base, which with many grain bowls defaults to things like that white rice that we saw earlier, or if you're lucky, you'll get a brown rice or maybe one of the more exotic varieties. But In this example, because of enhanced nutrition, we've now got that already on the plate as the base of our dish. So I put those lentils down. Now I'm going to lean into the color contrast of the vegetables that I have. And again, I'm leaning into this because it provides color and volume. Of course, a lot of the micronutrients that we're looking for are included here from a enhanced nutrition perspective. Again, flavor profiles, this can be spicy, this can be on the sweet side. We can use a lot of different vegetables, very few vegetables, what have you. So we're going to put those roasted vegetables right on top of this dish. When I've got my nice vinaigrettes, which I can just spoon over the top. It adds that pop of acid, some fresh herbs. And there we go. Of course, we can put on some additional accompaniments depending on what you would like. I happen to have a little bit of crumbled feta cheese here, which is part of that little Mediterranean diet. So we'll get some of that feta cheese on there to add some creaminess. I happened to be in my spice cabinet today. I said, oh, look, I've got this beautiful dukkha, which is this toasted spice mix with some almonds and some sesame seeds. This, I think, provides a great texture and also flavor contrast. So we'll just do a quick little pinch or two of those on top, and there you go. There is our dish there. And what we've built essentially has 15 to 18 grams of fiber, 18 to 20 grams of protein. It's got some balanced fat in here. It helps to regulate that glycemic response that you have, and of course, deliver that high satiety element that I feel full and satisfied by this dish that was brought to me. What I like most about this is that it's senior living friendly, it's healthcare friendly, and it's retail friendly, which means it can go into just about any retail experience, your cafe, what have you. And as Rocco mentioned at the top of the hour, what's most important to us is what we say at Restora, it's unapologetically delicious, because frankly, it doesn't matter where I source these ingredients or how I prepared them or how nutrient dense they are. If they don't taste great, none of that matters. Having trouble with my earbuds today. So that's our first dish there. Oh yeah, by the way, I wanted you to notice what I didn't do. What I didn't do was cut and take things away. I didn't restrict, I didn't shrink the portions. Instead, what I did was enhance it. I enhanced using a healthier fat. I enhanced with fresh herbs and aromatics. It's the same comfort profile that you would expect, but it has a vastly different metabolic response. And that in itself is what we're looking for with this whole concept of enhanced nutrition. The takeaway for me is that if a diner eats this 3 times a day, they've met their fiber requirements. So enhanced nutrition, as we just learned, doesn't start at plating. It begins with the mise en place and the way that we're putting this dish together. We chose lentils because we've upgraded the base. Instead of that refined starch that we would expect, we upgraded it with lentils. And that's an opportunity for us as chefs to really lead in a different way. By the way, if you're looking for the recipes, you can go to chefmthompson.com/recipes, and all the recipes that we're preparing today are available for you to download and to use. So feel free to jump in and check that out. Great. Okay, now we've got this first dish where we just upgraded fiber and protein. So now let's talk about another major area where most kitchens fall short and they forget. And that area is the area of the microbiome. There's been a lot of attention to this area right now because feeding the gut is how we sustain our entire system. The gut itself influences immunity and mood and inflammation and, of course, cognition. And for us, this is not about, supplements and diet enhancements and all those things. It's about a simple culinary technique, which you're probably doing already. And that technique is fermentation. And what I like most about fermentation is that it adds a level of complexity. And of course, as chefs, with our unapologetically delicious commitment, flavor is first, and it's got to be something that we think about. What I like most about fermentation is that it adds that flavor complexity. By the way, it's also a way for us to think about expanding shelf life, reducing waste, What we're going to learn about in a minute is it's going to boost nutritional benefit for the diners. It's going to help streamline our operational efficiency. This is a win-win-win all across the board. But here's a key insight. I think everyone has probably heard of probiotics, and there's been a lot of enhanced products from a CPG perspective out there, but very few people are paying attention to prebiotics. And essentially, these two things need to work together. That yogurt, for example, as a standalone is not a health food. However, when I take yogurt and pair it together with a whole grain, now I've got a symbiosis here. And it's the way of thinking about ingredient A plus ingredient B and how they work together. So it's things like sauerkraut and whole grains working together, kimchi, onions and garlic working together, yogurt and fiber like the farro working together. And this isn't necessarily a trendy thing. In fact, it's an ancient culinary technique that is now being validated by modern science, that these things go together for a reason, because it's flavor with benefit. So to demonstrate this is our second recipe. And our second recipe today will be the worm farro with fermented vegetables and herbed yogurt. Happens to be a vegetarian forward dish, high in fiber, protein forward. As we know, it's very important with some of the upcoming trends. And most importantly, it's microbiome supportive. So here's the whole key idea behind this. This bowl works because it intentionally pairs prebiotics and probiotics together. Not accidentally, but intentionally. So let me walk you through how this one comes together. So just like before with the lentils, I'm going to start with my pots. I'm going to start with 1.5 cups of the pearled farro, whole grain here. I like to rinse this just because it gets dusty as it travels in the bag. So just rinse this off first. We're also going to put in 4 cups of water. Stock is preferable. Same as before. We're going to do 1 bay leaf and a pinch of kosher salt. We're going to put this on the stove, bring this to a boil, and then reduce to a gentle simmer. And it's going to take roughly about 20 to 25 minutes. And just like before, what we're looking for is for the farro to be tender, but still pleasantly chewy. There should be some texture to it. And that's extremely important. That chew matters. And it matters because it actually slows down the eating process and gets people their saliva and their gut to be prepared. Texture also increases the satisfaction and stabilizes the intake. So it's got a lot of functional benefits that are tactical or tactile, but obviously it has nutritional benefit. Farro is a whole grain, which means that it contains intact fibers. And that fiber is beneficial because it feeds that gut bacteria. This is the prebiotic fuel. It's not super glamorous, whole grains, it's fairly common. It's probably on the shelf in your pantry today. But just like the lentil dish that we talked about earlier, this is foundational. So get this on the stove, just like before, check for that texture. Once it gets to the texture you're looking for, if there's any excess liquid, feel free to drain it out. Remove the bay leaf, and then just as before, I like to finish with a little bit of olive oil, perhaps a dash or two of some fresh herbs. Again, herbs and fat, not the enemy here. They actually help with the absorption and flavor delivery. So just as before, we'll hold that warm until we're ready to plate up. So the other thing I do want to do is just pause here for a second. So what I said earlier is that probiotics get all the headlines. There's probiotic sodas and probiotic and enhanced food product. It's on all the labels. But probiotics without prebiotics are almost useless. So the example I like to use, or the analogy I use, is it's like planting a seed without any soil. Now, I'm not talking about hydroponics here. I'm just talking about scattering seeds, just willy-nilly. And if it's not the best soil of the world, nothing is going to grow. There's no nutrient density. There's no environment where that seed is going to take root with no soil. Nothing grows. And the same is important when we think about prebiotics and probiotics. It's one thing to eat your probiotics, but if you're not also fueling with prebiotics, there's nothing there for that healthy bacteria to eat. They are the living organisms. So Probiotics are the living organisms, and they're the beneficial bacteria. They're the seeds, if you will, in our analogy. And they come from things like, in this example, we're using yogurt. We also are using sauerkraut, and we're using kimchi. These are examples. They help introduce helpful microbes to the gut. And what most people miss is that these microbes can't just live there automatically. They have to be fed, and that's where the prebiotics come in. So prebiotics, what are they? Essentially, prebiotics are fermentable fibers, and they can be found in a whole host of foods. Whether it's the whole grains, this one in particular happens to be a kimchi pickle. Side note, if you're not using kimchi pickles, go out and make some kimchi pickles. They're great on sandwiches. They're great in flavor contrast. You can chop them up and you can fold them into an aioli and make a spread out of them. But what's great about this is that it's completely customizable. I happen to like mine on the spicy side. It's great for food waste because you can take any peelings or scraps that you have in your kitchen. This one I like to keep whole because I like the texture of the pickles and the flavor of the kimchi. So just a couple of examples of how you can think about this. Essentially what happens is that the prebiotics pass through your upper digestive tract. And once they reach the colon, they become the dinner for those beneficial bacteria that we just introduced. So that's the science and the technique that's happening behind the scenes. For those of us who are chefs, what does that mean when we get in the kitchen? Again, let's think about that analogy we just used. We use food every day. We're familiar with seeds. The soil quality determines how these probiotics can grow. So in the kitchen, yogurt alone is not a health strategy. Kimchi alone is not a health strategy. However, the lentils plus the fermented vegetables is a symbiotic relationship. The onions plus kefir in a salad dressing is a symbiotic relationship. This ecosystem, this symbiosis that I'm speaking about, is the innovation that we're looking to deliver on the plate today. When these healthy, beneficial bacteria are properly fed, they end up producing short-chain fatty acids. And these compounds can support the gut lining integrity and help your digestive system function. It can help with immune modulation and help you fight off disease. It's got reduced systemic inflammation, if that may be happening in your body. It even helps you with improved insulin sensitivity. So when we pair these two things together, the pre and probiotics intentionally, we're not just adding flavor, we're actually completely reshaping the microbial environment in your microbiome. And again, that should be done intentionally, not just by accident. And just like our example with the seeds in the soil, we as chefs need to be the architects of this experience. So when we understand this distinction between probiotics and prebiotics, we really stop cooking ingredients and we start thinking about the ecosystems and the way that foods interact with one another. All right, so let's build our next recipe. Somehow I ended up with the world's smallest whisk, but just bear with me. We're gonna make this work. So we're gonna build this yogurt dressing, and what I'm going to start with first is 1 cup of plain Greek-style yogurt. Again, I prefer the unsweetened kind here, so that will go into our bowl. Again, one quick culinary technique. There's many of you may be familiar with an ingredient known as labneh, which is basically a strained yogurt. Feel free to take some, culinary freedom here. If you want it to be thicker, if you want to make it a sauce or a puree that you can smear on the plate based on your presentation, there's a lot of different ways that you can think about that. Small drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, like we talked about before. Similar as the last two recipes, I've got the juice of 1 lemon and some lemon zest will go in. Some of the fresh herbs. This dressing, I've got some parsley, some fresh dill, and ultimately I will add some grated minced garlic as well. Lastly, I'm going to put in some seasoning, a little bit of salt and pepper. Of course, I can adjust this to taste as we go. And then here we go with the world's smallest whisk. I'm going to whisk that all together and make up this quick sauce in this quick dressing. That all comes together. All right, grab my spoon here. And again, what I like about this particular sauce is I can spoon it onto a dish like I already have, the one with the lentils that we just spoke about, or I can easily put this in a squeeze bottle in my refrigerator, great for meal prep, but don't think about this as a health food drizzle. This is a culinary sauce, and the Greek yogurt brings more to it than just a sauce. This is high in protein. It's got the live cultures in it. It provides that creaminess and that mouthfeel that we're looking for as we're tasting our way around the dish. The herbs bring volatile compounds that support antioxidant pathways. Again, the acid that we're using here with the citrus juice prevents the heaviness and then allows us to reduce the amount of sodium that we're using to drive the flavor profile. So that's the experience there. Now, what I'll do is I'll grab that farro that we cooked earlier. And as a very similar presentation, what I will do is start to plate that in a similar fashion. I'll put the farro down. This is, again, our whole grain base. And I will start to put on some of our fermented vegetables. As I mentioned earlier, I've got these really great kimchi pickles, which I think add some great texture and contrast. We've got the chewiness already here from the farro that we toasted. It's March, St. Patty's Day is around the corner. So of course I got some sauerkraut ready to go, getting my Reuben ready for later this month. And we'll incorporate that as part of our plates. And then my favorite part is the customization part, where we can really make this nice. I've got some pumpkin seeds here. You could, of course, use some sunflower seeds. This particular batch, I toasted with some Cajun spice because I really wanted to have that contrast. If you like them on the sweeter side, do some candied. That all works really nicely as well. Again, some fresh herbs. We'll do a final drizzle of the healthy oil. And then the last piece is to top it off with a little bit of a dollop of our dressing. And do a couple of dollops around the plate. And there you go. It's a great dish. Quick note, by the way, if you like to kind of heat up some of these ferments, be very careful not to cook them because any heat will destroy the probiotic activity. So personally, I don't like this ice cold from the refrigerator. So what I ended up doing was take these two containers out of the refrigerator about an hour or 90 minutes before I plate up, and that allows it to naturally come to room temperature. So if you do enjoy it kind of at room temperature, just think about that ahead of time. But ultimately, like we discussed, these ingredients can bring that beneficial bacteria. There's some complex acidity in here with the tang of the yogurt and some of the fresh citrus. It supports the digestive tract. And frankly, operationally, ferments extend shelf life. They reduce waste. There's depth here without added cost. So the tagline and the takeaway for you is that fermentation is flavor with benefits. So think about that when you're creating a plate. All right. So that was our next demo. All right. Move this over here. We'll just make a little bit of space. All right. Again, if you're looking for those recipes, you can find those recipes at chefmthompson.com/recipes, and you'll be able to check that out. A great composition here. The bowl delivers on high fiber from the farro, protein from the yogurt, probiotics and ferments. It's a great dish here. All right, moving forward, my last dish that I'll present for you today is a dish that approaches something that many people have heard about, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that is around adaptogens. There's a lot of noise in the space, so let's get grounded. Adaptogens are not magic. They're not miracle powders. They're supportive compounds. When used properly, the chef's job isn't to make health claims, it's to use these ingredients intelligently. So let's explore this whole idea around anti-inflammatory cooking. And we're going to make our last sauce today, which is the golden tahini sauce. So let's look at the function and the impact of the ingredients. First up, got this backwards. I've got some turmeric. Many of you are probably familiar with turmeric. I actually toasted this off this morning to get it really aromatic. If you're not doing that with your spices, by the way, if you have the ability to either purchase whole spices and then grind them yourselves, wake them up in a pan, like get the essential oils going, like really bloom those ingredients. So I've done that for a couple, the ginger and the turmeric. The other thing to be mindful about is that turmeric is one particular ingredient that a lot of people have heard about and said, oh, it's great for you to consume turmeric. However, what you need to know is that in order to have the bioavailability or the ability for your body to absorb, it also needs to be paired, just like the pre and probiotics, with symbiosis ingredients. So whenever you cook turmeric also needs healthy fat, and it needs black pepper. It needs all three of these things for you to get the maximum effect of what the turmeric can bring to the party. Next up, we also have some ginger. Ginger is great because it supports digestion. As with before, I got some fresh lemon here. The citrus balances the bitterness and brings that acidity and allows us to reduce sodium. The olive oil we've talked about a number of times enhances absorption and also mouthfeel. So don't think about this as necessarily being a gimmick sauce. This is a vehicle for enhanced nutrition. And with enhanced nutrition, it's often about the sauce and the foundation. We've seen that twice already between the farro and the lentils. It's not the fancy thing we put on top at the end. It's the base, the foundation of how we construct the entree. All right, so let's build this together. For this tahini sauce, I'm first going to start with half a cup of tahini. For anyone that's used tahini before, you know that often this can separate. So, either put it in a RoboCube, get it all emulsified, or give it a good shake. This one I've got already nicely emulsified ahead of time. So I'm going to add that to my mixing bowl. This is going to bring some healthy fats to the party. It also is going to bring some plant-based minerals. It provides creaminess without necessarily adding dairy, which some people cannot tolerate. It's also another allergen in your operation. So think about using tahini in some of those applications. All right, for those of you who haven't used tahini, this is where the fun starts to happen. So I've got some citrus here. This one happens to be lemon. As you whisk in the lemon, the tahini is going to tighten and it's going to thicken. And that's entirely natural. That's expected. That's just the way the science of tahini works, which is fun. So you'll see that start to come together. Ultimately, what we're looking for is a very smooth, creamy sauce that we can drizzle or put in a squeeze bottle. If for some reason, like with mine, it's getting too thick, what we can do is just put a couple of spoonfuls of hot water in here, and it will start to loosen up and get the viscosity that you're looking for. If it ends up seizing, just a teaspoon or two of water will get it right back to where you're looking to get the consistency. Don't do too much. You want to make sure that it comes out really nicely. All right, so this is coming together well for me now. What I'm going to do is just let this relax a bit. And as this relaxes, I'm going to put in all of my spices. And again, it's important that these get bloomed. I've done this ahead of time, but essentially what you're looking to do is just bring all of these functional layers together. So I've got some turmeric that I'm going to add to this, some ginger, and some black pepper, and a little bit of garlic will go into this recipe as well. And then I'll start to whisk this together. It's going to come out to this really beautiful yellow color. Still getting thick on me here, so I'm going to add a little bit more here. And again, just like before, this is culinary intelligence coming together. This is not a gimmick. This is the way that we're thinking about intentionally crafting this. It's not a health flavor. It's a culinary flavor. It's leveraging sauces in a very similar way that we would leverage sauce in our regular flavor development to bring flavor and excitement to the party. All right, so we'll give this a final taste, kind of see where we're at here. I think it needs a little bit more pepper. So you can, of course, add some um, additional kosher salt or pepper as needed to get this to where you like it. All right, last ingredient, I'm just going to drizzle in some of that healthy fat. And again, I'm going for this emulsification here. This, you kind of have to do a little bit by eye based on how tightly it's come together, but you'll just drizzle it in very similar to the way that you would do a vinaigrette and bring this emulsification together. Again, don't be afraid of this fat. It's a healthy fat. It's going to help with absorption, supports that fat soluble nutrient absorption, and provide that satiety and that mouthfeel. Ultimately, what we're looking for is for the sauce here to be spoonable, but not too runny. I've actually got a nice texture here, which I'm going to do a little bit of smear on the bottom of the plate. Essentially, we can use this same sauce in a very similar format as we've done the others. We'll get this sauce on the plate and do a nice little spoon over of the sauce here. All right. So again, coming back to our topic of enhanced nutrition, this is not designed to be a gimmick or to change the way that you're thinking about constructing all of your dishes, but it should provide some context to, hey, how can I think about the nutritional and the wellness benefits of this? It's designed to be structural. Think about your dishes and how you're layering components. All of these sauces should do things like upgrading your vegetables, upgrading some of these simple grains. I've done this before with a very nice pan-seared cauliflower and used some of these sauces to help enhance that experience. We've used lentil bowls as an example today, farro bowls. By the way, this is great on things like grilled salmon or chicken skewers. Great in wraps. You could use this, any of these sauces as a spread to sandwiches or grab and go or anything like that. It's also great for whole meal prep. That's what we do at our house is we've always got squeeze bottles of this tahini sauce or the yogurt sauces, and it's great as an accompaniment for your family or for your diners just to simply squeeze on or enhance the dishes that you're serving. I like to think about these sauces as condiments in the similar way that you would add ketchup to French fries or hot sauce to eggs, those sorts of things. Now, suddenly, with this collection of sauces that you have, you've increased the nutritional density on the plate without necessarily increasing volume. You didn't change the dish, you just changed the experience and enhanced the mouthfeel. So what I want you to take away is that anti-inflammatory cooking doesn't mean eliminating food. It means layering these supportive ingredients strategically, whether it's the turmeric or the ginger or the rosemary, which will pair nicely. By the way, this also works in sweet applications, things like cinnamon and different types of oils that you can use, like in an olive oil cake. These are, frankly, ancient culinary tools. We didn't invent anything new. However, this technique is now supported by modern culinary science. And the mistake that we've always made is isolating these ingredients. The opportunity is actually integrating them, bringing them together. So what I'd like to do is leave you with this. Enhanced nutrition is rarely about reinventing cuisine. It's about adjusting the architecture of the dishes and the components that you have available to you. I would encourage you to start with your sauces. Start with blooming some of those spices to enhance that that aromatic nature and to get the taste buds and the senses going. Think intently about your fat selection. If there's a place to look at quality over quantity, it's in fats and proteins. Think about how you're leveraging those opportunities on your menu. Don't forget about the absorption strategy, that symbiosis, pair the pre and the probiotics together. Sometimes that's the most powerful shift. It could just be 2 tablespoons at a time, a sauce that finishes the dish. So if you do nothing else, 5 tips as a takeaway from today's webinar. First, upgrade your fiber before cutting calories. Remember our first example here? You don't need to cut calories. We just have to think about the ingredients that we're selecting and the excitement here. Next, number two, focus on protein quality, not excess quantity. You don't need a 12-ounce filet to deliver on your protein. We should be thinking about those other ingredients that are on the plate that can also drive your protein experience. We also want to think about how we can step back and build flavor with technique, not heavy processing. Nothing that we did today was processed. It was all whole food ingredients that you likely have either in your pantry or in your walk-ins already today. Think about supporting gut health through this flavor model intently. Build those flavor profiles and build that customization into your menus. And lastly, treat nutrition as a culinary discipline. Enhanced nutrition, again, we've said this many, many times today, isn't about taking things away. It's about enhancing the food and making the experience more than it is today. So at this moment, I think that we as chefs have more influence than we realize over affecting people's relationship with food. And I look forward to engaging with all of you. And Rocco, I'll turn it back over to you and happy to answer any questions that might be out there from our audience.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So we do have quite a few questions, right? What's the best way to get more natural, clean label nutrition for a chef who's always traveling?
I travel frequently myself, and if you're a traveler, you probably have what I have, which is your daily per diem that allows you to go out and grab lunch or coffee or what have you. I find myself taking my per diem to the grocery store and finding those collection of foods that I can grab, whether it's baby carrots and hummus or these sorts of foods that I can easily pack in my bag. I have had quite a few little packages of food taken away from our friendly TSA agents who said, no, you can't have that because it's got liquid in it. So unfortunately, this is one of those when you arrive to your destination, get yourself packed up. And frankly, I found that I can take 1 day's per diem and extend that for a whole week's worth of meals just by intently walking my way through that grocery store, having something available. So that's the tip that I use as a traveler.
I like it. And with global flavors blowing up across menus, are there any global grains, fermented foods, or high antioxidant foods to recommend for enhanced nutrition with a global flair?
I love it. That is a great question. Of course, everyone is probably familiar with the quinoa story, the ancient Peruvian grain that, people never heard of. And then all of a sudden now quinoa is everywhere because it's a high protein superfood. That's just one example of how we can think about leveraging different types of grains. I would encourage chefs to go out there and experience different things. Lentils were one that was introduced to me early in my career. I happened to go to some lentil farms and see how it was grown, how the different varieties, how they talk about crop rotations. That's super important. Teff is one of those ingredients now, and teff is an African ingredient, very similar in texture and mouthfeel as like a chia seed would be. But what I have seen in terms of culinary trends is people are talking about teff as being the next quinoa that's out there. And I think there's just a tremendous amount of grains in some varieties out there. So I would encourage getting out there and experiencing them. And by the way, think about how you can integrate them. Brown rice and quinoa together in a sushi roll. Well, it's not traditional Japanese, but it's a very cool way to leverage some of the ingredients that you have. So get out there and experiment and enjoy that experience.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of the ingredients that you utilize today, like the farro, the lentils, I think those can actually even be utilized in like a vegetarian burger or a plant-based burger. Would I be correct in thinking that?
100%. And again, like everyone is in a different place based on their dietary, preferences. So, whether you're prepared to go fully plant-based or you want to just consider blends, take a beautiful grass-fed beef and blend in, some lentils or some walnuts or some additional nutrient. People are still going to enjoy that beautiful burger, but they're going to get the added nutrient benefit of the additional things that you've added, like the lentils or the walnuts or what have you. And by the way, that's a great way to insulate. Mushrooms is another one of those ingredients that people add to, blended burgers. So, whether you're going to go full blown plant-based or you want to do some sort of blend in between, this whole idea about blending experiences is definitely a great way to go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you were doing today too is going to increase protein without increasing calories for a plant-based diet, correct?
100%, 100%. Yep.
Nice. And then for chefs or cooks at a community-based organizations, what certification or training do you recommend to level up on providing enhanced nutrition?
There's a lot of great training that's available out there now. I know that the ACF does offer a number of programs. The Culinary Institute also offers a number of programs that are available for continuing education and to get those techniques. One of the organizations I worked with in the past is Ruby, which is the online cooking school, and they offer some training and development programs. They are also connected to the ACF program, so we can get some credits there as well. So those would be the areas that I would encourage the audience to check out and see if they can enhance their own skill set, but also the skill sets of the folks that are on their teams.
It's awesome. Any closing comments for our listeners, Chef? You did a fantastic job, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I enjoyed myself. I hope the audience enjoyed as well. And the takeaway that I would encourage everyone to have from today's presentation is don't let health food be the afterthought or the thing that you do as a checkbox to say, oh yeah, we've got the one item on our menu, but let's think about how we can ingrain these techniques, no pun intended. How can we ingrain these techniques in the dishes that we're offering every day? We're not necessarily pushing the envelope to go full plant-based, but let's think about how we can leverage these techniques to impart additional flavor and nutrient density in the dishes that we're already offering on our menus.
Awesome. And again, Chef Thompson, thank you so very much for a great and informative presentation on enhanced nutrition. Also want to let everybody know, be on the lookout for probably about today or tomorrow or something. You're going to receive an email that's going to have some CEHs in there. Also, too, Chef Thompson's link will be in there. So all these great recipes and so much more will be in the link that we're going to be providing you for the chef's website. So thank you so very much for that. Make sure you take a look, too, because, we've got some more great webinars coming up. So we want you to fill out that survey. And don't forget, we hope you'll join us on March 25th as Chef Lakeisha Harris presents on Course Task Force and how it's shining a light on minority chefs in the kitchen. Then on April 1st, the National Watermelon Promotion Board will be sharing creative ways to utilize the whole watermelon. Chef, I'm sure you have tons of creative ways to utilize watermelon in your cuisine. And then make sure you visit the media tab on acfchefs.org to register for upcoming webinars. On behalf of the ACF National Office, we want to thank you again, Chef Thompson, for such an amazing webinar. To all of our members out there, thank you so very much. Have the most amazing day that you can.